Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to the Kortex Media Podcast, where we navigate the fast-paced world of automotive and more. I'm your host, Corson Schmidt. Here today, I have Ryan Goldberg. Ryan is a visionary entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Shadow 6 Racing, the company behind the world's first aquatic utility vehicle, the Typhoon. With a master's degree in marketing and finance, Ryan has spent the last 4 years shaking up the motorsports world, blending business savvy with bold engineering. He's no stranger to building companies, having launched ventures since his early 20s. And today, he's not only pioneering aquatic motorsports, but also leads a major cosmetic surgery practice. Ryan's relentless pursuit of innovation has earned him multiple patents and the title of Most Innovative Entrepreneur 2022 by Voyage magazines. The Typhoon, his flagship invention, is a groundbreaking machine that merges the thrill of motorsports with aerospace-grade technology, attracting attention from adrenaline junkies, the military, and rescue organizations alike. Ryan's journey is proof that when you refuse to accept limits, you can turn even the wildest ideas into reality. It's great to have you on, Ryan.
Thank you. Great to be on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Appreciate you having me as a guest. Yeah.
Hey, no worries. I'm excited for this conversation. Just to start things off, do you mind
Sure.
just speaking what you guys do at Shadow 6?
So Shadow 6 is a company that I think is kind of revolutionizing motorsports in its entirety. I think we're probably one of the few companies out there now trying to innovate that's not trying to do so in space or trying to take anybody to Mars or anything like that. We are more of a company focused on innovating and changing transportation and motorsports in terms of entertainment, at least right here on planet Earth. And so, one of the areas we've seen that has been pretty heavily neglected in the past in terms of innovation and technology has been the marine world. So, there really haven't been any new advancements or big changes or anything that's come in and shaken up the marine world much in quite some time. And so, to that end, I think, we're fairly unique as a company in that we've essentially created a vehicle unlike anything else. It kind of blends the best of a lot of worlds all together, and it's kind of a hybrid between a supercar, a Baja truck, and you mesh those two together and put it on the ocean. So I know that can be a little bit confusing for people, but that's ultimately what we do. Is we are producing and marketing and selling a vehicle called the Shadow 6 Typhoon, and it's the world's first aquatic utility vehicle. And as you've probably noticed if you've taken a look at it, a lot of people call it a side-by-side on jet skis. That essentially was something that was very intentional. When we first released the vehicle, or when I first started discussing the vehicle, even before releasing it, I told people I wanted a Baja truck or a trophy truck that was built for the ocean. And, people just kind of looked at me sideways, having no idea what in the world I was talking about. And then I noticed one day, I just was frustrated trying to explain it to somebody. And I said, picture a side-by-side on wave runners, and this person just, okay, that makes perfect sense. So I came to realize, from that point forward, everybody I had that conversation with, if I described it as a side-by-side on wave runners, they understood it immediately. If I said a Baja truck on the ocean, people had no clue what I was talking about. So aesthetically, in the beginning, we kind of tried to go for a look very similar to a side-by-side, literally, on wave runners. And so, as that's moved from being a conceptual vehicle into something that is produced and marketed and sold around the world, we've slowly kind of progressed away from looking like a literal side-by-side on wave runners. So it's got a little bit more of its own aesthetic now than it once did. But essentially, that's what we do. That along with a handful of other really cool, crazy vehicles. But we tend to be the company that's going out there trying to design things that people say are impossible or have tried to design and failed in the past. And we make those things a reality. So almost built from proving people wrong that things can be done.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And you guys are you guys only tailoring towards the aquatic motorsports at the moment, or are you guys producing anything
Yeah, in
online?
terms of production, everything we're doing is in the marine world. We are an MMA certified marine manufacturer, so that puts us in a certification category
Yeah.
amongst the top 15% of boat builders in the entire world.
Wow.
And so, a lot of people look at what we do at first glance and they think we literally took a side by side and just strapped it onto wave runners.
Yeah.
And then, if you're in the industry or you've had a chance to come and see one of our vehicles, you've come across it in person, people are generally kind of blown away by the degree of engineering and the level of sophistication that goes into everything we build. But, at this point in time, we've kind of geared everything towards the marine world. And,
Yeah.
I find it's a pretty easy space for us to innovate, while it may not be for other people. But we do have several other products that are very likely to come online as consumer-facing products that'll be sold to the public. But product number one is, as you've seen, the Shadow 6 Racing Typhoon.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So before we get too in depth with it, do you
Yeah.
mind speaking kind of about your background? So you had a background in business, and you kind of had some other
Yeah.
ventures. Can you speak about your
Yeah,
upcoming
so
and kind of what inspired you to also create Shadow 6?
Yeah. As a little kid, I was always into messing with remote control cars or electronics or building robots or being into computers, things of that nature. And I mean, it was kind of in its infancy when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
I remember kind of being blown away by the internet prior to what most people know as being the internet, going back to maybe 5 or 6 years old. And this is long before AOL or early dial-up or anything like that. But I just kind of had this passion for it right off the bat when I saw what the capabilities were. And to that extent, I've always been sort of passionate about technology and innovation. And so, in growing up, I spent a lot of time building myself things that I wanted that didn't exist in the marketplace. So it might be tearing apart a toy that I bought and a couple of remote control vehicles, combining them all together and turning them into something new. And pretty quickly I went from realizing, I had significantly pissed off my parents, by tearing apart things that were brand new. Then fast forward 2-3 days later and they see a howitzer machine gun that fully operates and swings out the side of an RC vehicle. And they're like, okay, how in the hell did you make that out of the other? Okay, well, we were upset, but we're kind of fascinated now that you actually turn that into something and it works.
For sure, yeah.
And so that's largely been the story of my life in many different areas. But I've had businesses since I was young. Started out in investment banking, and got into mortgage banking and whatnot. And I ended up marrying the person that I was dating at 16 years old, and so my wife is actually a plastic surgeon. And, that sounds like this wonderful thing where you're making a lot of money. The truth is that's absolutely false. It's a very tough profession and it's not very rewarding or lucrative at all, unless you decide to make it that way. And I think, you could probably apply that to any industry.
For sure, yeah.
Frankly, it is what you make of it, right? So,
Yeah.
in the medical world, I kind of stepped in and decided, look, you renting space at other medical practices and being on call at 7-8 hospitals and only making $60,000 a year, working 80 hours a week, is not something that works for me. I don't understand why you would even bother working if you're in those circumstances. And so that led me to open up the very first medical practice, which has kind of evolved into several surgeons now, physician's assistants and extenders. But we're a 100% cosmetic surgery-based practice. And, it's funny, I kind of tell people when they ask what I do for a living, I essentially say I'm a drug dealer, right? And I sell two drugs. One is vanity, and the second drug is adrenaline.
Yeah.
So I've got all the women covered, and I've got all the men covered. Women, they want to look pretty, and I got them covered there. And men, they're looking for the next high or the next dose of adrenaline. And with Shadow 6, we've got them covered there as well.
That's
So,
cool. That's funny.
yeah, so all those businesses have kind of done fairly well over the years. And I think as I was, in my late 30s, I hit the point where it was either, pull back and start retiring a little, taking more time to myself, or unfortunately in my personality, it's fill it up with something else and do more. And so, I guess just before my son turned 3, I took him to Las Vegas. I asked him what he wanted to do for his 3rd birthday. He said he wanted to go on a guy's trip, and he wanted to do so in Las Vegas.
Awesome.
And I kind of laughed, and I asked him why. And he said, well, the Monster Jam World Finals is there. And upon realizing he was serious and he did know what he was talking about, I figured, why not? We booked some tickets, and we went out and we saw the Monster Jam World Finals. The last day we were there, we're driving home, and we went past the sign for the Las Vegas Polaris RZR Adventures. And so it was essentially where you rent a side-by-side and you go racing out in the desert.
Yeah.
So here I am with a kid who's, not even 3 yet, but he's in the passenger seat having the time of his life. And, I'm kind of fascinated because this thing's bouncing all over the place, but he's sitting there completely still, huge smile on his face, having a blast, not scared at all. And I'm kind of, waiting for these moments where we're going to have impact hitting rocks or sticks or things of that nature. And it never comes. It's just perfectly smooth, completely steady ride. And so that, that kind of fascinated me from an engineering perspective. But at the same time, my son's telling me, Dad, we need to buy one of these. We have to get one of these, and we have to get a trailer. I try to explain to him, in Florida, it's not really all that feasible to do that.
Yeah.
And so, we went back and forth a little bit, and I think I made a comment to him along the lines of, unfortunately in Florida, we don't have desert, we have the ocean. So then he looked back at me very quickly and was like, okay, well then we need to make a side-by-side for the ocean. I'm like, I don't know if that'd really work or not, but I always made this habit of I kind of told myself early on I was never going to tell my kids that anything was impossible or that it could be done without working through it or explaining it to them, or taking the chance to kind of talk it through with them, so they see that it's okay to think about anything you want, regardless of how crazy it sounds to other people, or regardless of what other people tell you is a waste of your time or can or can't be done. Ignore all of that. It's up to you to decide what can be real and what can't be real, and figure that out for yourself. And don't worry what people think, whether they think it's ridiculous or not. And so in the context of that, here he comes along wanting this side-by-side for the ocean. And, I started coming up with reasons that it wouldn't work. And as we do that, I certainly would have questions, and I'd have to go answer them. And as I did, I'd find, well, maybe it could work. And so then that kind of progressed into, he and I coming up with this design and this concept of this vehicle. Keep in mind, this is a 3-year-old we're talking about. But, we come up with this idea, and I start sitting down with other friends of mine who are in the mechanical engineering industry and electronic engineering or electrical engineering and things like that. And I explain this concept to them, and the same thing happens. They say, well, for these 5 reasons it won't work. And, I guess that took me through about a year-long journey of constantly coming back and saying, hey, remember these 5 reasons you said this thing isn't going to work? Here are my 5 solutions. They'd all kind of laugh and like, you kind of should have thought about being an engineer, man. You've got a knack for it. I mean, you've come up with some pretty complex solutions. The bad news is here's 5 more reasons it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so that went back and forth for the better part of a year, until one of the engineers said to me, look, it's very clear that you don't take no for an answer. And since you seem to be hell-bent on pissing away money, why don't you go ahead and build one of these things for yourself? Because, the reality is you're not going to be able to truly know if this is going to work or not based on all of the research you've done without trying it. You've made it past the phase of it can be shut down on paper. Now it's this hypothetical thing that sounds insane, but the only way to really prove you wrong at this point is to try it and fail. And so, that led to building the first prototype, and I think that got completed in around 2018 or so. But upon finishing this thing, we dropped it in the water, and it was one of those things where everything worked exceptionally well and far better than we had expected it to work.
That's awesome.
So, it was kind of a lot of up and down all at the same time, because it was super exciting that we found that this concept works. And then we have the downside of, well, I went into it kind of half-cocked, and so I wasn't planning on building a really expensive prototype or anything like that, but by the time I finished it, I was like, man, I really wish I would have put the effort into it to turn this into a fast vehicle that was fun to drive. This thing's amazing. Why did I use junk materials to build it? And frankly, the vehicle that I built wasn't really capable of handling or performing in any of the ways that the actual Typhoons do today in the way that they're produced. But, I had a pretty good roadmap for what needed to be redesigned, where it had potential areas where it could fail in the design concept, and eventually translated that into, which ended up happening, I think, 2021, essentially us creating the first prototype that resembles or is a lot like what you see today in the Typhoon. And so originally it was geared entirely towards the military, but everybody who saw it kind of fell in love with it and thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread. And several people said things to me, but it all kind of amounted up to realizing that here was this vehicle that I kind of invented or whatnot, and designed and invented and built. But, what was cool about it, I had a lot of people that were super successful, could have anything they wanted, had accomplished everything they could ever want to. And they'd all kind of hop out of the vehicle and, their legs shaking and kind of laughing. And they would just say, that is hands down the coolest thing I've ever experienced. And I can't tell you the last time I've had a genuine smile on my face like I do right now.
Yeah.
And then as I'd repeatedly kept hearing people say that, it kind of clicked to me that, for us as a company, that's definitely part of the way we measure profit. We talk about measuring things in smiles per hour. And frankly, it was weird because we shifted from this whole defense-based mindset and this machine that was very capable to maybe the most important thing that it does beyond all of these other sort of engineering breakthroughs on the water is that, it puts a smile on your face that's pretty impossible to remove.
Yeah.
And so that
awesome.
had been kind of the impetus or the starting grounds for building the company into what it is today. And so
that's awesome.
We've kind of re-geared from military, and moved towards making people happy.
That's an amazing story. Your 3-year-old son came up with the idea that you've now built. What was his reaction when you built the first prototype? He was probably mind blown that you put that.
His mind is definitely blown. I've definitely earned, I think, permanent cool points in life beside him. His personality tends to be a little bit more like mine than the average person. So, I think we finished it, and, he's kind of a perfect little replica of myself in that he comes and now we need to build a mech suit. People say building a mech suit is impossible and, you can't get enough energy in there. But remember when we were talking about, building, hydrogen fuel cells and using that to create electricity? And again, keep in mind, this is still at 3 that he's saying these things.
That's
but,
crazy.
He's initially super excited, but then already ready to move on to building mechs and mechanical biosuits for the military, where I'm like, well, let's take one thing at a time, man. I think we can sit back and celebrate this one for a second, but he loved it, although he was ready to move on to the next project.
That's awesome. That's good though. He seems to have quite a knowledge base on and a very creative side, which is really cool. And it helped you. He probably helped you design it exactly how it looks today.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm assuming.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
super cool.
Yeah, he
That's
sat
awesome.
down and started sketching right beside me, and I'd help him clean it up, and then, help him out with figuring out dimensions and where things would truly have to be from a size perspective for it to work. But, it was a cool opportunity to put things on paper and work on a fun project with him, but to also teach him about a bunch of complex subjects that would be super boring for a child. But when you put it in the context of this machine, now you can see, okay, here's why I would be interested in, this, calculation or that calculation or this aspect of physics or that, So, seeing hands-on kind of gave him a real true passion for what he could do with that education. So, I think that's probably to this day still one of my favorite things about, having worked on the project and done that with him.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. That's a nice family moment that you guys had together there. And you were speaking earlier about the reaction that you'd get from people stepping into this vehicle, the reaction they had when they were out. I watched the Seaboys video when it dropped. I saw the thumbnail and I'm like, I've never seen this before. So I watched the video 3 years ago or whenever it was posted. I was like, that is so cool. And now I'm talking to you today. It's crazy. But even their reaction, they're on the water, they're ripping motorsports all the time, and they loved it. Like they've never seen anything like it either. If anyone wants a good representation of the vehicle, they got to watch the clips from that video.
Yeah, we've it's kind of insane. So I ended up putting the vehicle out there on the internet because I wanted to see what TikTok was. Yeah. And frankly, you can't really search through much of TikTok or do very much on it unless you have an account. And so I don't do really personal social media accounts. It's just not my thing. I think generationally, I just missed the whole, either you're into social media or you're not. And I was on the side of not being into it at all. But I set up this TikTok page and I decided, I'm going to make it for Shadow 6. That way it's not any pictures of me really, and it's not about me. And, that's how I'm going to justify making the social media page. So I set up the Shadow 6 page. I think I put a video up of myself and one of my employees bouncing up and down on a Typhoon, showing how the suspension worked. And, I did this around 9 p.m. I surfed for a few minutes, maybe a half hour or so through TikTok, got an idea for what it was. I wake up the next morning and I've got an alert that says, congratulations, you've got something like 790 some thousand likes on your first day. You're on a streak, keep up the good work. And I'm like, crazy. What? Is that real? I mean, 700, how in the world did I get 790 some thousand likes? Yeah. And then I'm noticing this video's been shared and, at this point it's at like 11 million views. And it really was like that. We're literally talking overnight, not figuratively overnight. Yeah. And so, we kind of blew up and in that we had everyone and their brother asking us to do collaborations with them, including the Seaboys. Ben is kind of the point man, I think, for the Seaboys, Ben Roth. And in terms of setting up the different things that they do and kind of organizing, the little adventures that they go on. And so he was one of the first guys to reach out to me. In fact, pretty much every major influencer, anybody you could imagine, within a week or so had reached out and wanted to collaborate. That's crazy. It was tough because, here I am kind of building a company and I'm kind of getting thrust into being an influencer, which, for me doesn't really, it's strange. It's a love-hate relationship, right? Because I didn't want to be an influencer. I don't care about being an influencer. I don't care about fame. I don't care about accolades. It's not what gets me excited. But, lo and behold, here I have, the average teenage girl's wet dream, if you will, by being a social media celebrity, if you will, online almost instantly. And so, that led to, working with the Seaboys and, I guess the first time that we met, we were driving and they were sitting in the back of my car asking me just regular things, what do you do for fun? And as I'm answering things, they're taking notes on everything I said. And I didn't know any of this, but, a few months later they contact me. They're like, okay, so far, pretty much everything you say, even though it sounds ridiculous, is absolutely true once we look it up. So do you actually do all these things? And we're not saying that in a questioning whether you're telling the truth or not kind of way, but could we come do some of this stuff with you? So you see, obviously, that progressed into riding a snowmobile to Peanut Island across the ocean, jet skiing with alligators. Crazy. Quite a few different episodes. And so it's become pretty much an annual thing at this point where they fly out and film with us. But, it's funny because I had so many people reach out about doing collaborations that I just said, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing any more collaborations. I've been playing guitar since I was 6 years old. And so I just kind of threw this thing out there sarcastically. I was like, unless Tim Henson from Polyphia, who's my favorite guitar player, reaches out and wants to shoot a music video together, I'm not doing a collaboration. You couldn't even make it up. Fast forward a few months later, I have a message from Tim Henson, literally, who hadn't heard of any of this, who just coincidentally decides to hit me up, and apparently had seen some stuff I'd done playing guitar on Instagram. But from there, also saw me drop a picture of the Typhoon, and he said, hey, we're coming through on tour, and I'd love to shoot a music video with you. And I'm just thinking at this point, like, okay, I mean, now nothing surprises me. Really anything could happen, and it's right in line with the way this works. So
that's crazy.
So we did end up actually shooting the Reverie video with Polyphia.
That's super cool.
And doing quite a few more collaborations. So yeah, it was kind of a neat experience. Met a lot of really good people. It's been pretty cool seeing, I think the YouTuber world, it's easy, to be in my age group or to be around people and think, well, these kids get lucky and they hop online and they throw out some videos and now they're making millions of dollars and I work my ass off and it's like, I don't think most people have an appreciation for the amount of work and passion and dedication that goes into what these guys do. I mean, because the Seed Boys are producers, they're the talent, they're the directors, they're the editors, they're dealing in marketing, they're doing the jobs of most people at a network, if you would, including the talent. But they're all of these things rolled into a few guys actually handling all these tasks. And it's been cool to kind of watch them grow as well over the last couple of years, because it went from being a lot more grassroots to being better and better produced. But it's interesting to see when people think that, it's just young kids who get lucky because they put themselves out there. It's certainly not that by any means.
Yeah, and they've put their work in too. Like, they've been shooting videos for a long time.
Yep, they have. And you can see the amount of effort that they put into these things. And they're very regimented and maybe more so than myself, but, they're asking me questions like, so what is your week schedule, your schedule like during your week? And, I asked them, well, can you give me an example of what you mean there exactly? I mean, I do a lot of stuff because I run multiple companies, so I'm all over the place. And they're like, well, we wake up at 5 a.m. and then we do this and then for 3 hours, and then we have 2 hours of this, and then there's 4 hours of this. Then these two do this for 3 hours, and these two do that for 2 hours. Then Tuesdays, and then they rattle it off. I'm like, holy, good God, man, you guys are insane. But that gave me a whole new level of appreciation for the amount of work that goes into producing some of the stuff that people see as just being this kids game or whatever, and they don't realize just how much is going into everything these people produce.
For sure, no, it's super cool, and it's nice that you got to be on the I guess the back side of it and the front side of the camera, which is really it's a really cool experience for you, and that's all. How was it what you thought being on camera and on YouTube and everything?
So being a guitar player, I mean, I'm kind of used to the spotlight or being on stage or being in front of people. So I mean, I'm pretty used to that. In the context of Shadow 6, it's weird because it was much more of an overnight thing in the world of music. I mean, you appear to be an overnight success in the world of music, but the reality is, you're out there, kicking the street all day long, working your butt off, trying to get to that point. So there's nothing that feels overnight about it, even if it is fast. Shadow 6, on the other hand, I had so many people DMing me and calling me and coming at me, and followers just pouring in by the dozens. That
crazy.
It was incredibly stressful. It wasn't actually a happy thing. It was one of these, like, I didn't sign up for this. I'm not really sure what this has to do with manufacturing these vehicles, but I now have hundreds of thousands of followers out there in social media land, and so there's certainly some value in this, and so I can't just quit doing it, and I can't give it up. But now I have to figure out how to incorporate this into my life, and to leverage that to be able to continue to get free marketing to the extent that I am. And that's essentially what it's become. So even to today, I mean, we're still filling orders that are all overseas because our early videos were released at 9 p.m. and so we're still filling orders in Southeast Asia and the UAE. So we have the only Shadow 6 Typhoon in the United States right now that's a civilian-based vehicle. Beyond that, everything that's been sold has been overseas, and that's all still been from just that first day or two.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's crazy. I mean, we still have not caught up to even the first day's worth of orders, which is kind of a crazy position to be in. But that's kind of what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years, is that we've refined everything we've done. We've created better processes for building vehicles. We've streamlined the way that we've done things, made things a little bit more cost effective as we've gone along. But we've kind of gone from, we had a prototype, to we became internet celebrities, to now we manufacture, produce, and deliver a fully functional vehicle that is covered by manufacturer's liability insurance, that's certified by the NMMA, that's been seen by the top officials in the United States Coast Guard. So kind of all this stuff has just come at an incredibly fast pace.
I bet.
But
Yeah.
I guess that's the nature of everything that happens in this company so far.
For sure, and it's super cool that you guys did get that fame through social media, because it definitely helped out your brand, and even getting getting Shadow 6 out there, getting Typhoon out there, and it's super cool.
Yeah.
And
I would never think you could sell a $250,000 vehicle through social media.
yeah, it's
But
crazy.
it appears you can, so I've been proved wrong.
How many vehicles are you guys usually making a year? Like, are you guys still manufacturing them in-house? And
Yeah, so we
with your
manufacture them
team?
in-house. We're about to open up a new production facility. So,
Super cool.
this year we're gonna work our way into 2 units a month. So that'll put us at around 24, 25 units next year.
Nice.
We're looking to continue to double that each year thereafter.
That's
So the goal is to hit kind of a peak of 100 units a year, and just to call it a day at that point,
Yep.
for a lot of different reasons. But one of them is maintaining secondary market value. So a guy goes and buys one of these vehicles. You fast forward 3, 4 years down the road. Does it go up in value? Does it go down in value? So we've kind of tried to take more of an approach like Ferrari or Lamborghini has. So instead of trying to fire out as many as we possibly can and not focus on quality, we focus on quality first and producing the ultimate product and having everything perfect, and then we release a unit. So it's a little bit more slow paced, but the value is then retained for our buyers, and they're not buying something that is commoditized and losing half of its value. In fact, anybody who owns one can make a significant profit simply by selling it a day later. I mean, you could double, triple, quadruple your money most likely buying one of the vehicles if you have it ready to go. On our side, that's tough because you get celebrity after celebrity that's like, okay, well, for me, if I give you money, and it's like, well, you got to understand. I mean, the guy that is in front of you is a prince. I don't think he's going to say, hey, do you. I don't mind waiting for Mr. Celebrity here because he's got a few extra $1,000 here that he's willing to throw you. So it doesn't really work that way. I think, sometimes it's hard for people that are buyers to understand that every one of our buyers is extremely wealthy. And so you hit social media people out there that are like, well, why wouldn't I just buy a boat? And thinking to myself, like, okay, you don't understand. Our customers, not only do they have a yacht, they have a second yacht that follows their main yacht, that all the people work on, that drive all the cars that are registered to each of the countries they stop in, that has 15 side-by-sides, 10 four-wheelers, 2 helicopters, 3 submarines. You're not thinking in the right terms. They didn't think, should I get a submarine or a Typhoon? It's just, do we extend the yacht by another 100 yards to add whatever other toys to it, or do we not? Not should we spend $250,000 on a vehicle or not? So, it's a little bit unique in that regard. It's just it's a different customer than your traditional consumer. And again, it's definitely it's definitely a want, not a need, for your civilian-based uses. But nonetheless, the market is certainly there, and we think will continue to be there for quite some time.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
that's crazy. That's super cool. Yeah, I don't know what else. That's just the process that you guys have in place right now with your team, and everything's moved forward for you guys so quick. That's super exciting, and that's you guys have a super cool product, and obviously people are looking for it, and that's super cool. How do you think your background in marketing and finance has helped kind of guide you through this process, like this such a quick process?
I think from a marketing perspective, I understand numbers incredibly well. And I guess the same is true for finance. And so I think it's helped from a financial perspective in that everything that we do is cash. We are, I'm the sole shareholder in the company. We are 100% debt free. We don't use customer funds to build either. So a customer puts funds down as a deposit. It sits in an escrow account. It never gets touched. So we are building 100% cash and taking on ultimately, in my opinion, as little risk as can possibly be taken on by getting into a venture like this. Sure. From a marketing standpoint, I think being aware of how many people you have to put yourself in front of to actually get a customer at the end of the day, and understanding how hard it is to get yourself out there, how hard it is to build a brand, how important it is to have brand integrity. I think all of those things have been kind of, they've all critically relied upon the marketing background, because when you become internet famous, if you will, overnight, you don't really get a second chance to get it right. And so very quickly, I kind of had to be on my feet in terms of thinking about marketing, because really there was no marketing in place when we launched the product. And overnight, the world knew who we were. And now we had to have marketing materials at a time where, I didn't even have a website set up.
Yeah.
But here we are with people calling left and right wanting to buy these $250,000 vehicles. And I'm realizing, like, okay, I've got to kind of catch up here and get back to reality so I can actually produce these things for people. But I think having the background definitely allowed me to kind of, I guess, take advantage of the opportunity that was in front of us in terms of having that social media growth and having that global presence right away. But marketing for us has kind of happened entirely largely on its own. So knowing what to do has been really critical, but where most people are paying to get themselves out there or getting editorials done, or, and I'm not sure how familiar you are in your side of the business, but the reality is most people are spending money on an ad if they're going to be written up in a magazine. Or they've got a publicist that they're paying who has good relationships with magazines. Whereas I've got the publications and the people writing out and, kind of beating down my door to get stories. So for me, marketing has just been a function of yes or no in terms of what I decide to make time for or don't.
For sure.
And so, I guess it's a pretty nice position to be in terms of building a company where
definitely,
I think I've got the end result of say maybe a $5 to $10 million marketing budget that's all been created out of $0.
Yeah. No, that's totally true. And like having you guys have a great brand now with a lot of people wanting to work with you guys, and it's definitely super helpful, especially for your type of vehicle, right? Like I want to say in the aquatic utility vehicle space, like it's the only one of its kind.
It is, yeah.
So
and
it really,
you've got everything patented from design down to.
It's super cool. So and no one ever saw that before. So as soon as you post that, people are like, "Oh, this is sweet." And it's nice that you can get in contact with those, or maybe not get in contact with the people, but you're getting that vision out. You're getting you were getting your vehicle out there for people to see, which is super cool.
You believe it or not, it actually does get me in contact with anybody. So, it's funny, but I've kind of taken advantage of it, if you will. So, I never really thought of social media in this context, but it is somewhat like LinkedIn, if you will, especially Instagram for that matter. So what I find is I get an awful lot of people who are other executives, people looking to collaborate or looking to partner up in different aspects. of the business, but they're all coming in through social media. And so I'm actually meeting these people on Instagram, but I've also come to realize I could meet anybody that I want to meet through Instagram. So, one of the benefits to having, a couple 100,000 followers, and especially if you do it very quickly, if I send a DM to somebody, it shows up at the forefront, dead center in their mailbox. And so if I want to get a hold of a celebrity, if I want to get a hold of a CEO, anybody, I put a DM out there, and in all cases, it turns around and I'm in contact with the people.
It's pretty crazy.
I've even used it in the medical space. So I brought on a facial plastic surgeon. I've got 28 women who work for me in the medical practice, and they're all gorgeous women, and everybody thinks that I'm doing this on purpose. I mean, they're all very pretty, but that has nothing to do with why I hire them. And our hiring process would kind of negate me from actually being able to do that on purpose. I interview people, I bring in 3 people for working interviews, but the staff picks who gets hired out of those 3 people ultimately at the end of the day. But needless to say, I wanted to find this beautiful female facial plastic surgeon, and everybody was making a joke about how I was going to pull it off. And, I identified one about 3 years ago. Well, at this point, maybe 4.5 years ago. But, I try to call her. I have my wife try to call her. I have other people kind of drop hints that I'm trying to get a hold of her. Never got a call back. Never got any attention paid to me. It occurred to me, I'm like, wait a minute, she's 36. Let me try DMing her on Instagram. And I'm guessing she's going to have to wonder what in the world this company is, especially when she clicks on her page.
Yeah.
But it's got, if anything's going to get her attention, this will. And sure enough, a half hour later, I was on the phone with her, and within a few weeks, she was working for me.
That's crazy.
So, I've been able to leverage it in a lot of different aspects, including the medical world, which would have never guessed that. But sure enough, social media works for something.
It's definitely a huge marketing tool that a lot of people don't leverage it like they could. Like you're using it for everything, right? You're getting in contact with those other brands that are big brand, not even just brands, but people. And it's definitely helping you guys out. As for
even getting taken to SEMA, from wet signs, that came through social media, and sure enough, we ended up basically having our way paid to go to SEMA without ever dropping a penny.
Super cool. How do you see the aquatic utility vehicle market kind of evolving now that people saw what you've done?
So I've definitely seen an impact in other things that would be considered, I guess, in the same space. So since we took off, I kind of saw the world of jet cars, if you will. I don't know if you've seen these, but they have like a fiberglass Lamborghini body or a Ferrari body or a Bentley. And then they got a wave runner, and they put the internal components of the wave runner into these vehicles.
Really?
And it's like a car that you drive on the water. And so there's a little bit of a gimmicky aspect to it, but those definitely took off like wildfire when we kind of came onto the scene. Yeah. Same for a few other small companies that were in the aquatic space. So it brought a lot of light to the industry for innovation and some of the new unique things that are out there for the marine water space, or the marine space that didn't exist. But I see, for us, it's kind of evolving the market in that people are more accepting to some of these new things. And some of these other companies are able to now get themselves out in front of the world where nobody was giving them the time of day. But, we've brought a spotlight to the industry in its entirety. And so, that's been very beneficial for those people. And so, as a company, ultimately where I want to see things going is racing. The issue so far is that, I'd love to see a Baja 500, but Bimini 500. So leave Jupiter, Florida, drive to Bimini in the Bahamas, turn around and come back, and essentially have a big race full of Typhoons doing that.
That would be crazy.
And so that'll be some of the stuff you see here over the next few years, is actually putting together a racing league, organizing the people that are racing. It kind of is a bit of a surprise to me, but a lot of these super wealthy people that you would think would be willing to put their new toy up for racing or for getting it out there and letting the world see it, unfortunately, these people are billionaires. They could care less about what people think of them. They could care less about you knowing they have the toy. The fact they don't want you knowing anything about them.
Yeah.
And they do not want to share their toy with anybody. They're not wanting someone to break it in a race. They don't care about sponsorships. They don't care about anything. And so, it's been unique to deal with that because, early on I figured, well, hey, let me call these 2 or 3 buyers here and we should be able to work out something for them to work in a marketing scheme or some kind of race or something along those lines. Then I try to reach out to these people and they look at me like I'm insane, and they're like, yeah, buddy, nope. We have no interest in doing anything else. We just want to go play with our toy and let us know when you have another one available for us. Okay,
That's crazy.
Interesting to get used to, but that's where we are. So
yeah, no, you said that billionaires don't want anyone to know you, and it's so funny because you'll get billionaires, and then you'll get millionaires where they want everyone to know them, right? Like they're all about the socials and the just getting that following, right?
My wife has always kind of said this thing that is I guess more and more obvious as time goes on, and it's that rich is loud and wealth whispers.
Yeah, it's true.
So I didn't quite grasp that entirely until being on this side of things, and now I've seen, yes, people that are wealthy could care less about you knowing, and in fact they don't want you knowing a damn thing about their wealth or anything about them. The guy telling you that he's worth $500 million flashing around a bunch of money, look in the back, the guy's got a 32-inch flat screen TV. I mean, I'm just saying, if that was really a real stack of money, you probably had the extra $100 for a 42-inch. But call me crazy. I'm not buying your story there. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not adding up.
No, for sure.
Why did you keep the rental decal on the side of your car? But yes, that does tend to be the case.
Yeah, and it's nice that you're kind of working with that next class up, so you don't really have to. Yeah. You don't have to deal with a lot of them are younger. I will say that a lot of them are younger guys that want to flash their money. Yeah, but you're probably working with a lot of not older generation, but just higher quality. Yeah,
they're older guys. Yeah, I mean, by and large, they're older, royalty, or they're pretty savvy buyers so far. Yeah. And so I think we've definitely hit the right customers, and I think in terms of the market and where things stand for us, I guess I look at business as being a widget, right? So it doesn't matter what business you're in. I think competition is fierce when you're in the middle, and competition is wide open when you're in the top. For sure. So if you do a good job or an okay job, you're going to have a lot of competition and you're going to struggle a lot. If you do something incredibly well and you focus on being the best and catering to the best, it's really easy to compete and you have very little competition. Very few people want to put in the effort to go the extra mile in life, or in their business or in whatever it is they do. And frankly, I think that's the difference between people who blame things on seasonality and the economy and whatever else. I mean, that's great and fine, but the truth is great businesses are always going to do well. Nordstrom's was successful during the Great Depression. As much as people want to think that everything went out of business, that's not true. That is not true at all. So I think putting in that effort is something that for any company anywhere, whether it's the automotive space or the marine space, if you are truly trying to be great at what you do, you're going to have a very easy time succeeding. If you're okay with being okay, the lights may not be on tomorrow because you may not make your power bill. Yeah, and frankly, that's how I see how I see things going for our industry and all others for that matter.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. If you wanna do good, high quality work, you're gonna have good, high quality customers, and it goes back and forth, right?
Sure. Very few people actually want to do it.
Yeah,
it sounds good, but when you see the amount of work put in, lots of people turn at that and they decide, never mind. Here's an excuse for why it's not going to work or I can't do it.
Well, that's exactly where you came from, right? You took an idea that you basically broke down into a bunch of not going to work, and you built it up of how it's going to work. And I was speaking to someone else on the podcast about he's making sleeper trains. and when he came out with the idea, he said he's going to prove himself how it's not going to work, and he tried to do it and he couldn't. It was going to work. How through all the research and everything he went through, it was going to work. So he decided to pursue that, and that's honestly the best way to go about it.
Yep, I would agree.
For sure. Where do you want to see the future of aquatic utility vehicles, and what's next for you guys, Shadow 6 Racing?
So, I think for us, it's really settling into our groove and becoming a larger scale producer of vehicles. We're always going to be a relatively small manufacturer, and manufacturing is always going to be limited to, say, like I said, around 100 units a year. But the goal is really to kind of take everything we've developed and done over the last few years, and we're now opening up a new production facility that's going to allow us to produce what we think will ultimately be close to 100 units a year. Really the plan is to take everything that we've learned and everything we've kind of worked the kinks out of, and now allow this thing to kind of spread its legs and run. And so, the goal is to kind of put in the effort that I thought I was going to have to at day one, and to do so now that we actually have the infrastructure in place to meet demand and to produce these vehicles. And we figured out all of the speed bumps and hurdles, insurance, regulations, things of that nature, because it's a crazy complex world out there. And so,
Sure.
It's something that, day one, if I would have known how hard it was, I would never in a million years done this. I would have dropped out of the race before I ever got started. But, it's crazy to sit back and think, okay, this went from being a drawing and BSing with a 3-year-old, trying to have educational stories come here and there as we talk about stuff. But going from that to progressing all the way to the point where these things really are being sold and are legal and are compliant, and they go through insane testing, and
that's awesome.
Just the full level of infrastructure that goes around producing a vehicle it's kind of mind blowing. But it's crazy to look back and see that we've been able to create that, and that we're a legitimate manufacturer now producing vehicles that didn't even exist 4.5, 5 years ago. And now it's to the stage where we can bring them to a much larger group of people than we have in the past. And like I said, I think for me, getting to that level of growth is important, one, and two, seeing them race. At the price point, I don't know that they're going to be within the reach of everybody out there in the world, but at least if they're out there racing, everybody gets the chance to see a little bit of the fun, to join in on some of the excitement. I'm kind of excited to see a few buyers that are lined up that are getting into the rental space. So I think that'll be really cool, seeing a place where people can actually go and drive them, and
that would be awesome.
Experience them. And and everybody asks me, why don't I do rentals or tours? It's like, well, again, you can only do so many things in a day. Yes, I would make plenty of money renting these out, but I manufacture them. That's what my job is. That's what I do. Somebody else will make their money and have a whole separate career based on doing something with that. But at the end of the day, my job is to produce them for people.
For sure, that's awesome. I love the vision behind that, and how you want to help the rest of the community out, right? If you sell it to someone, they're part of the community now, and they're helping obviously get your brand out there, but they're bringing in some money as well. So that's super cool. You're looking out for the community. So that's kind of where you guys want to be in the future. What are some of the goals that you guys have for the next 6 months to a year that you guys are really looking forward to?
Let me think about that. Goals over the next 6 months. I think getting into this new production facility for me is probably goal number one. There are a lot of things that I wish I could tell you about that aren't really goals. They're kind of things that are scheduled and already happening. Unfortunately, because of marketing and the scale of some of the companies that we're working with on a marketing perspective, I've got NDAs in place, so I can't really tell you a whole lot.
No worries.
Some of the fun things coming along. But, the Shadow 6 Typhoon will be a lot more visible here in about 6 months. So outside of TV shows and things like that, we're starting to partner with other brands and do some things that are really cool. But, I think, again, moving out and getting into our new production facility, getting settled in, and I guess getting to experience some of the upcoming collaborations, if you will, that are in place come to fruition. I think that's kind of what the short-term goal is. At this stage, it's tough to have goals because I feel like we hit what would be a goal before I have time to come up with what the goal would be in the first place.
Yeah.
It probably sounds strange, but again, by the time I think about what I want to accomplish, I'm already thinking, holy crap, how in the world did we do this, or how did we do that? And it's already happened. So
Moving fast for you guys, for sure.
Yeah, I'm always behind the eight ball and just deciding what's going to happen next. It's more keeping up with, okay, well, that's one hell of an opportunity. How am I going to monetize on this and actually seize the day and make this happen? But so far so good.
No, I'll have to buckle up and just I'll wait 6 months and see what you guys come out with, because that's super exciting. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Let's get a couple more questions here for you.
Sure.
Who's your biggest motivator or influence, or I guess we'll call it role model, in your entrepreneurial journey?
If I had to centralize it on any one person, I would probably go back to this guy, Napoleon Hill, who wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. And the funny thing about that is I'm not a guy who reads books or pitches books to people. But, what I identified with in that book, were all these stories of people and kind of ways that they had dealt with circumstances. And it kind of gave me a framework for what being successful in all aspects of life really look like. I mean, people hear Think and Grow Rich, which is this book that Napoleon Hill wrote, as being, here's my book to learn how to be the richest man in the world. And they're not realizing that, yes, they are talking about money, but they're also talking about having a happy life. They're also talking about having good relationships with people. Yeah. They're also talking about building a legacy. And so for me, that was always really important, because as I met and as I continue to meet different individuals, it's much easier for me to take away lessons from them and to learn from them, having read that book and having sort of that lens to view, I guess, my opportunity to learn from people that I have. But I think, a lot of that's been created strictly from that book, just seeing, okay, well, here's an example of a guy who's doing what they talked about in this book. Here's an example of a guy who's doing that they talked about in the book. And it gives me a chance to kind of sit back and take advantage of the opportunity to learn from those people. Whereas, I think without it, I probably wouldn't think twice about what I was being told, or might be thinking about whatever my rebuttal was to whatever they were saying. But, in reality, it's produced, a scenario in which I can actually, for whatever it is, psychological reasons even, take advantage of and learn from people and do it in a much more effective way than I probably could have in the past.
For sure. No, that's a great book. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard so many great things about it, and I've wanted to read it. I just haven't gotten there yet. But
highly recommend it. I'm not a guy who recommends books, but it is a great book if you want to learn about success.
That's awesome. I've been looking into it. I just haven't got there and bought it yet. But
it's a short read.
No, that's awesome. I'm gonna look into that once again. But looking back on your journey, what are some of the most important lessons that you learned, and what advice would you give to kind of a young, new coming entrepreneur?
Go for it. I mean, there's no such thing as success without failure, right? And I think so many people are too dead set on getting it right to ever go out there and try. And so I think people have a real Achilles heel that's built into them from a young age, because they're afraid to fail and they're afraid to get it wrong and they're afraid of what people might think of them. And we live in a world where it's easy to learn anything you want to learn about anybody. And so now you're on the center stage if you fail, and it's easier for people to point out failures. The thing is, failure only occurs when you decide it's happened, right? Because whether something went the way you wanted it to go or doesn't go the way that you want it to go, you still have a chance to get back up and try to make it happen again. And so I think, that's the most critical thing you can have as a resource, no matter what. I guess I've always had this mantra: any decision made in fear is always the wrong decision. Because even when you're successful and you own a bunch of companies, you're going to have those moments where you think, oh crap, if I don't do this or that, this company's never going to make it. Or if I don't pull this off. And so I've learned that when those things happen, I just kind of close my eyes and repeat to myself, any decision made in fear is always the wrong decision. Any decision made in fear is always the wrong decision. And that makes me kind of forget about whatever I was stressed out about. And it clears my head enough to where I can think about things in a way that isn't shaded in failure or any of these other things. And so, just getting up there and making things happen and not being afraid to fail is critical. And not looking at failure as a bad thing is critical. Again, like I said, I don't think there is success without failure. And the sad thing is for people that have had highly successful lives and never experienced failure, I almost feel bad for them because it's got to suck to fall the distance that you'll likely end up falling at some point in life. I've never met somebody who's gone through all of it perfectly. So, the reality is just keep on keeping on.
Exactly. Oh, it's great. That's just life in general, right? You're gonna take dips and you're gonna fall down, but you just gotta get up and keep moving, right?
Absolutely.
So that's some awesome advice. Super cool, yeah. Where can people find you on your website, social media?
So you can see us shadow6racing.com or Shadow6Racing on both TikTok and on Instagram. We've got a little bit of stuff out there on YouTube. That's probably going to happen an awful lot more in the near future here. Cool. What am I waiting for? I was waiting until I could monetize. So we have lots of good content and lots of good stuff filmed. Yeah. There are a bunch of things that you have to have in place before you can actually monetize on YouTube. And so I've been kind of waiting for those things to just naturally happen. And once they have, and I can monetize, then I don't mind putting in a little bit of extra effort into creating episodes for people and, taking an opportunity to kind of teach young kids about some of what we do.
For sure. Using
3D printing, 3D scanning, all the different technologies that we use that are new today that make production and prototyping so much faster than they used to be in the past. But,
yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking your time to come on the podcast today and kind of speak about your journey and give just some of your knowledge to the audience because you've ton of it, and it's super cool that you're upcoming and your boy helped you design that the bike. I think that's super cool, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on and speak with me.
My pleasure. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Fantastic.